One of the things I want to talk to you about that has been risen in culture recently is neurodivergence.
Mm-hmm.
Big topic. Autism, ADHD, so much there. I had a mother send me a voice note the other day. Her child has just been diagnosed with autism. She's really struggling with it and trying to understand what it means and where it came from and was it hereditary. And there's so many guests on my podcast have talked about the rise in diagnosis of ADHD and is it something that we are causing by the way that we choose to live our lives? When you, and from an understanding of neuroscience, what is neurodiversity and what are causing it and what is curing it?
Yeah, so this would come more from my experience as a psychiatrist when I did do some work with children as well. So neurodiversity is basically anything that doesn't fall into the category of a typical brain. So, you know, the way that most of the population think and how their brain works. So that would include things like dyslexia and dyscalculia and ADD, ADHD and autism / Asperger spectrum and other things. I think that a lot of it is to do with better diagnosis. So I'm not saying it isn't the case that these things have risen, but I think we're also much better at diagnosing them. So for example, when I worked with mostly little boys with ADHD, when I saw them for the first time and I took the full family history, there was quite often an absent father who'd actually been in like several different relationships and like couldn't hold down a job. And you kind of thought, yeah, he probably had it, but was undiagnosed. So there is an element of that. I do think that it is an adaptation to the world, which is changing at such a rapid pace, which is, you know, always switched on, so much technology. And some people would say that autism is even like a form of evolution in a way to like help us keep up with the changing pace of the world.
So you don't necessarily think we know if it's increasing in prevalence?
I think it is, but it's partly naturally increasing and partly because we're better at diagnosing it.
Okay. I do wonder as well sometimes things like dyslexia, whether humans have always had an element of dyslexia, but it's more obvious and more of a challenge in the world we live in. Think about the schooling system and writing and education. These are fairly new constructs. Yeah, exactly. And so this isn't to do with neurodivergence, but to do with things like gender identity and sexual orientation. What I found in my research with the indigenous wisdom is that those things were understood long ago. There was a place for people and an understanding of, you know, their role in society, and sometimes even an elevated role. So it's really interesting that we're grappling with things now, like, you know, what gender does your child want to be, and what life, you know, is your child going to have if they're gay or whatever. And like, apparently these ancient cultures were dealing with this like all the time, no problem. Your second series of your podcast is going to focus on some of this work that you learned.
Yeah.
What are some of the interesting things that, if you could only tell me a few that you think would have the most significant impact on my life, and you can't mention learning Portuguese, what would you tell me about?
So one theme that's come through quite strongly is related to creativity, which was kind of mentioned, but that doing things like humming and chanting are actually like really beneficial. And they've obviously been around forever and we don't really know why people did them in the first place. But in terms of expressing creativity and like calming down the nervous system, that's one thing that seems to have come through from kind of like Ayurveda, but also from the first Americans as well.
James Nestor said that to me.
Did he?
That humming was good for your health and immune system, I think he said.
Yeah.
Like through your nose, like
There's different types. You can do even just like
go on. I can see you.
I was going to say.
You were avoiding it. That'll be in the trailer.
But also humming like at the back of your throat, humming like between your lips. So like, it's such basic stuff. I mean, you can do that on the tube, you know, you can do it. That was going in the trailer.
No, it's not. Why would that help? Why would that help us?
I don't really actually know the answer. I'm just thinking of this, what can we get from indigenous wisdom that could help us now? But I guess it's something to do with regulating your parasympathetic nervous system.
Okay. That's actually what he said. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I've remembered. This point about aging generally, longevity and aging, one of the really interesting things you talk about in the book is this idea of sort of psychological priming and psychological priming of aging. And that psychological priming is the effect that the mindset of aging has on our physical body, how our thoughts about aging affect our physical abilities. What I interpreted from that is our thoughts about aging have an impact on our aging.
Yeah, so actually there's a really fascinating study. It's one of my favourite ones to talk about, which was 3 groups of octogenarians.
What's an octogenarian?
People in their 80s.
Okay.
And one group was the control group, so they just lived like normal for a week. One group had to reminisce about being in their 60s for most of the week, whenever they had an opportunity to. And one group were actually driven to retrofitted versions of their homes that looked like what their house looked like 20 years ago. They were given newspapers dated from 20 years ago. They had photos of themselves in that house when they were in their 60s. And one of the things was they got there and they were sort of like, okay, who's going to carry our suitcase up to the bedroom or whatever? And they were like, no, you're 60 now. You carry your own suitcase. So it literally started from the minute they got there, and these little old ladies had to, and gentlemen had to carry their cases up. After 1 week, the people in that group were taller because their posture improved. They had better musculoskeletal coordination than they had a week before. In before and after photos that were shown to people that didn't know them, they were rated as younger in the 1 week after photos than the photos from arriving at that place. And the reminiscing group also had some improvements, but not as much as the group that lived like they were in their 60s.
And so there was 3 groups.
Yeah.
The ones that went back and relived their life, the ones that reminisced, and the ones that did nothing at all.
Yeah.
Wow. And that really goes to show the impact of what we think about ourselves and then all of the physiological consequences of that. You talk about this, your eyes as well. About you were going to get, was it like laser eye surgery or something?
No, it's just like...
People told you needed glasses.
Well, my optician told me. So he's of Indian origin, same age as me. And he said, I think, you're probably going to need reading glasses next year. And I was like, no, I do not want reading glasses. That makes you look really old. And he was like, yeah, I know we both look younger than we are, but, your eyes are going to age just like anybody else's. And I was like, no, they are not. So I left, came back a year later. He said, how's it going with the reading? I said, it's fine. And he sort of went, okay, Tara. So he's doing my eye test. He spins around on his little chair halfway through and says, your eyes haven't got worse. They haven't even stayed the same. They've got better. And I said, I know. And he said, what have you been doing? And I said, well, I just said no to you when you said, I'm going to have to get reading glasses. And when I'm looking at my phone or a book, and it feels like it would be a bit easier if I moved it further away, I just don't.